Well, good evening. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have for you a wonderful long presentation. It's a 2-hour presentation, but guess what? I'm going to attempt to get it done in about 15 to 17 minutes. We're going to see. I'm going to move very quick. The topic tonight is getting your landscape ready for spring, or more in particular, getting your Florida landscape ready for spring. If you look to the right here, you're going to see a plant, and this is a terrible picture, but it's the only one I could find on the internet. When I was, 9 years old, I used to read Mad Magazine. And in Mad Magazine, every issue had scattered throughout a picture of this plant. It was called an Arthur plant. And you would see it in Spy versus Spy or in one of the features. You'd see it in several areas in the magazine scattered around in the early 60s. Then it just kind of went away. But back then, I was very fascinated and I wanted an Arthur plant. And I asked my mom, could I get an Arthur plant? And she said, I don't know what that is. So I sat down and I wrote William F. Gaines, who is the publisher of Mad Magazine, a letter. And I said, I want an Arthur plant. Where do I get one? Simple letter. He wrote me back a very long and detailed letter on how to create one. As it turns out, an Arthur plant was simply an avocado plant, and he gave me instructions on how to propagate an avocado with the seed and the toothpicks and the little glass of water. You've all seen it. And back when I was 9 years old, I made my very first Arthur plant. That's how I got into all of this good type of stuff, as bizarre as that is. We're going to dive right in right now and start with the first thing that we need to look at in the spring is turf grasses. What type of turf grasses do we have around here? There are several types of turf grasses that are all over Florida, but around here we have St. Augustine grass. That includes your Floritam, your bitter blue, your palmetto, your Seville. There's a bunch of them. But it's a runner type grass. It is the most common. And it's very, very nice. It has some high fertilization requirements. It has some high water requirements, but it is pretty much the standard of lawns. The former standard of lawns before St. Augustine grass was this thing. It's called Argentine Bahia grass. That's what I had in my backyard. In the front yard, I've got St. Augustine grass. It grows straight up out of the ground. It is very drought resistant. It takes a lot of traffic, to whereas the St. Augustine grass is not drought resistant, and it does not take traffic. Both grasses like a lot of sun. Okay, and the next grass we're going to take a look at is zoysia. Zoysia is a dwarf grass, and it's becoming somewhat popular these days. But it is pretty, hard grass to maintain. You can buy it as sod, which, by the way, is the way I recommend it, although you have all seen for years the ads in the Sunday paper with the nice lady in the evening dress and the pearls on, plugging her lawn with zoysia. That is a way to go, but it is very slow and time-consuming. But people do it all the time. Emerald zoysia, there's several zoysias out there starting to become popular. Another one that is making a big comeback is Bermuda. There are several types of Bermuda. Bermuda is sometimes considered a weed when it's growing into St. Augustine grass. But it is a grass. It's what you see on the golf tees out in the golf course. There's Tifway. There's a bunch of varieties. This is the common Bermuda. It is actually starting to make a comeback. It requires full sun, takes a ton of traffic, and a lot of fertilizer. So that's what you have there. So what do we do now for the spring for our turf grass? There's two things that we need to do. The first thing we need to do is we need to go out and mow. If we haven't done that already, and I'm sure you have, it's time to go out and mow. Very important to get the weeds under control. A lot of annual weeds are starting to pop up. If you keep them mowed, they won't go to seed and you won't have weeds. The next thing it's time to do is fertilize. Yes, fertilize. We're going to talk a little bit about that here in just a minute. Fertilizer contains the following things. It has nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. It's important that you know what these things do. Here's a popular fertilizer, 888. It's a general use fertilizer. The first 8 is nitrogen. What does nitrogen do? It does a lot of things, but the most important thing it does is that it inspires growth. That next 8 in the middle is phosphorus. What does phosphorus do? It does a lot of things, but the most important thing that it does is it gives us root development. And it also helps with blooming because you're developing these fine little hairy feeder roots. Kind of fun. And then the last thing that we have here is potassium. What does potassium do? Potassium does a lot of things. But what we think that it does the most and the best, or what I think it does the most and the best, is it makes plants strong and gives us something in grass called leaf expansion. Makes the blades a little thicker. We like that. So what is my favorite fertilizer? I've got a ton. There are organic fertilizers. There's chemical fertilizers. For the sake of spring, I'm going to give a brand name. I like this. It's made by Bayer. It's called 3-in-1 Weed and Feed if you have St. Augustine or zoysia. If you have Bahia, you don't want to use this. If you have Bahia, I don't recommend fertilizing. How's that? Oh, by the way, fertilizing has got a really bad name in our county right now. If you see some of the county trucks, it says, leave out the fertilizer. The reason that we're leaving out the fertilizer is because they don't like the phosphorus. Well, most of the phosphoruses now are gone from fertilizers. In this particular fertilizer, there is no phosphorus. It is a 30-something, 0.15, I believe, is the analysis there. But this is the one I recommend because it has a couple of weed killers in it, and it's going to protect your lawn through the spring. It's going to kill off a lot of existing weeds and prevent a lot of weeds from coming back. So I like that. All right, what are some of the problems that we have with lawns? Well, there's insects. And if you have St. Augustine grass, this, ladies and gentlemen, is a very popular insect, also a very difficult to control insect. This is called the chinch bug. Chinch bugs grow to about 1/5 of an inch long. Those are that's a little egg, and those are the babies. They're the nymphs, and then they grow into that full-size adult, which is about 1/5 of an inch long. It has piercing, sucking mouth parts. What does that mean? Oh, it's like a little needle. It drills a little hole right into the node of the St. Augustine grass, and it sucks out the sap after it injects the stuff to soften it up a little bit. Very difficult to control. Grows mostly in sunny areas, out by sidewalks and driveways. They don't exist much in the shade. All right, just that. And by the way, we'll talk about control of all of these things as we go on. The next one, if you have Bahia grass or Bermuda grass or even the St. Augustine grass, is this little guy. He's about almost an inch long, or up to an inch long. Some of them are a little bigger. It's called a mole cricket. This is a tawny mole cricket. Mole crickets used to have one generation per year in Florida. Now they have two. This time of year, they have just finished their mating season, where the adult males mate with the females, die a horrible death, don't ask. The females have then gone and laid eggs into your lawn. And those eggs are starting to hatch out probably next month. So in April, they start hatching out. But they eat the roots. That's how they do their damage, and they can really go after a lawn. I lost my backyard 2 years ago to mole crickets. And here's an old popular one, white grubs. We used to not see a lot of white grubs in Florida, but now they're starting to make a comeback, and we are starting to see a lot of them in St. Augustine grass and Bermuda grass. And the next one of my favorites, this is called sod webworms. We don't see these in the spring, but pay attention. You see that little brown moth there on the right? When you start seeing those little tiny moths flying around your yard, know that they are laying the little tiny eggs that you see over on the other side, and they will grow into those little tiny translucent worms, which will eat your grass, go into a pupa stage, and then emerge, next year, or in a couple of weeks, actually, as the moth, and off they go. All right, lawn disease. We're not going to talk an awful lot about lawn diseases, because we don't want lawn diseases and we want to prevent them. But the most common around here are brown patch fungus, which is also called rhizoctonia, dollar spot, gray leaf spot, which is on a lot of St. Augustine, and then rust, which we see on a lot of the winter rye that we sometimes use, that are now starting to die out if you planted a winter rye. The best thing you can do is prevent fungus. If you get fungus, do know that it is going to be a problem forever, and you're going to be using fungicides forever. Michael's favorite all-purpose turf insecticide. I've got a couple of them. I've got a chemical one I'm going to share with you right now. It is the Bayer. By the way, I'm not sponsored by Bayer, but this is the second Bayer product that I've talked about. I just liked it. I like the active ingredient in this. One of the active ingredients is imidacloprid, and it is very, very good. It's a non-repellent insecticide and works very, very well. If you want to go organic, I got a great one for you. It is called, this one is called Eccentra. Hard to find. Buy it on eBay. It is a botanical. It works wonderfully. I will not use it because I cannot stand the smell, although I am the only person in America that can't stand the smell. Everybody else loves the smell. It's a very botanical smell. It's just too strong. But it works very, very well, and I like it. So I like to give you a natural, and I like to give you a chemical alternative. Let's move, oh my gosh, let's move right into ornamentals. What is it time to do? It's time to prune out the dead and the overgrowth. See that nice lady there pruning? Time to get that done, and it's also time to fertilize. By the way, that little fertilizer spreader is made by Scott's. I just bought one. I bought one a year ago. It's called a Whiz. It's a little hand fertilizer spreader, but it's got a motor in it. It's battery operated. It is the coolest darn thing I have ever seen. I absolutely love it. Now, let's move into the fertilizer that Michael likes. Okay? The fertilizer that Michael likes for just about everything is a citrus fertilizer. Here's the Sunnyland. That's available in most places, but if it's not, look for a good citrus fertilizer. Notice the analysis, a 6-4-6. Some of them are 6-4-8s. The 6 being the nitrogen, which gives you that spurt of growth. The 4 being the phosphorus, which is going to stimulate all kinds of root development. And the 6, which is the last number, which is going to build strength. That is the potassium. But look for that. And a lot of the citrus fertilizers, why I like them, is because they have statements of secondary micronutrients in them. What that means is they have minor elements, minerals like you and I take. Like, with our vitamins, it's got the boron, the zinc, the iron, the copper, the molybdenum, all of those things. I like that. I use citrus fertilizer on all of my shrubs and on all of my trees. It just gives it a pop. I like it a lot. Let's talk about real quick, because we're running out of time. Ornamentals, shrubs, and trees. What are some of the problems? Guess what this little guy is? Well, it's a little girl, because if you look real close, she's giving birth. She's an aphid. Aphids show up on new growth. In every house I've ever owned, except for the one I'm in right now, I had a crepe myrtle out in the front yard, and every year my crepe myrtle would get aphids on the new growth, and it used to just bug the bejeebies out of me, and I was out there, because I love my crepe myrtles, and I was out there spraying constantly. I don't do that anymore, but these little guys have piercing, sucking mouth parts. They go into, you find them in new growth only, and they do a bunch of damage. The next one here, this is called Florida T-scale. You see it on a lot of things, on ligustrums, on viburnum odoratissimums, and the viburnum suspensiums. You see it a lot of things. It's just a Florida T-scale. It's there. We'll talk about control on all of these things in a minute. And how can we forget? And by the way, there's a lot of insects that bother us. I'm just going over some of these major ones. The whitefly. What a problem. What a problem. And then here's something that you see. Ever see this on your plant? It's called sooty mold, or some people call it black sooty mold. Let me take a drink. Gosh, that was a drink. Excuse me, I don't edit. All right. Black sooty mold is caused by everything that you saw just before now. Aphids, white or T-scale, mealybugs. It's caused by all of these things. It is their excretion. It is their poop. And then when you get the sooty mold, the ants come to eat it. It is a real problem. So how do we get rid of most of these insects? I'm more of a natural guy when it comes to ornamentals. Actually, I don't use a lot of insecticides. But if I were, I like the Eccentra again. Going back to that, it does work, although I won't use it because it smells. Here's one of my very favorites, Safer Insecticidal Soap. You can buy it in a concentrate like this, or you can buy it in little squirty bottles. It is a fatty acid. It is a soap. Totally natural. Works well. One of the insects I didn't talk about are caterpillars that get onto your plants. And with the caterpillars, I like using what's called a BT, Bacillus thuringiensis products, dipel or thuricide. Again, natural product, works well. But getting for all these other pests that I was just talking about, I like these. And here's a little surprise for you, but it's a little annoying. These are not insecticides. Both of these are soaps. One is Amway LOC. You got to find an Amway distributor, and then you got to hope they're not going to try and recruit you. Over on the right is something called Shackley Basic H. They're pretty much a very close product. I use this stuff a lot. I actually use the LOC. I used to use the Basic H when I could get it, but I use the LOC. And I will give you my formula. Put a gallon of water in a sprayer, then add 3 ounces of either one of these, and spray like crazy. On the white flies, it does a really good job. Although it's not an insecticide, it makes no insecticidal claims. I'm just telling you, it's really good. It's good for the soil. It helps break down a lot of good stuff in the soil, and I like it a lot. All right. I wrap this thing up in about 16 minutes. I want to thank you so much for joining me. My name is Michael Crose of the Ask the Garden Geek radio show, and now I will take questions. And if you have any questions, you may email me at michaelcrose@gmail.com. Michael, C-R-O-S-E, @gmail.com.